can now bring you never-before-seen footage and perspective on the Opera House pro-Palestine protests of October the 9th. Remember, this was only hours after the horrific events of October 7th and before Israel had begun any military activity against Gaza. The footage will be part of a soon-to-be-released documentary and fundraising effort called Where's the Jews? Joining us from the team working on the documentary is Daniel Lewkowitz. Daniel, great to see you here back on Outsiders. Sorry it's in such a ghastly kind of time in history. But tell us what we're about to see on the footage.
This is going to shock viewers. If you watched a small section of this footage, you'd think it was a protest in Gaza. But this was not Gaza, this was in Sydney. This was at the Sydney Opera House. And there's been a lot of talk about this rally, what was said, what wasn't said. But when you actually look at what was said here, you're going to realise that we have a problem right here in this country. And as viewers watch this preview, I want them to remember the context of this, which is that this isn't a protest against Israel responding in Gaza. This happened and was organised within hours of the greatest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. So this was not a protest against the IDF or against Israel. This was a celebration of Hamas, and it's something that every Australian needs to see and remember the context of the police effectively saying that there wasn't much that they could do either before, during or after what you're about to see.
Well, this was a celebration of mass murder, as Daniel points out. This footage has not been seen before. We're going to screen it now. It's the shorter version of Daniel's longer documentary, but it's 2 minutes. This was Sydney. This is your Sydney. Steps to the Opera House and Town Hall on October 9th. Off we go.
So basically we support Hamas and Hezbollah. I love Hamas and Hezbollah.
Multicultural Australia. Hope you're proud of yourself, people. Daniel, lots to unpack from that footage, and you've got hours more of it. What's really disturbing is it's almost like the Mujahadeen or some kind of crazy ISIS-type celebration. Arabic slogans with historical references to massacres of Jews and so on. Tell us about it.
Many of the people you saw on that screen, they weren't your typical, blue-haired socialist Marxist left that will turn up at any protest. You nailed it. These were Mujahadeen on the streets of Sydney. These weren't garden variety protest chants. These were Islamist calls for violence against Jews, and not the euphemism, Zionists. I mean, this was about hurting, killing Jews. This was about praising Hamas, and the police stood there and they did nothing. And after the event, rather than actually going back through Opera House CCTV, which is one of the most CCTV covered areas in Sydney, or Town Hall prior to that, they did nothing. Instead, a few months later, we had Mal Lanyon delivering a statement like a hostage video, basically saying that, there's really nothing here, to cover up for the police failures before the event, when they told Jews to stay away from the Opera House, during the event, when they stood there quietly while there was a riot, and after the event, when they've done nothing else except effectively gaslight people that really nothing happened there.
And let's not forget, of course, that the only reason it was at the Opera House was because the Opera House was being used, the flags of the Opera House, to commemorate as a sadness of what had happened on October the 7th.
Well, Rowan, not only was it a commemoration there, but what we saw there was a celebration of a massacre. Tell us, Daniel, about some of the slogans that we heard there. I heard there's a slogan you hear in a lot of things, Khaybar something, Yahud, which is about the Jews. It's historic. This goes back to ancient sort of Mohammedan hatred of the Jewish tribes in Arabia. Tell me about this and what this really means, these things they were saying in Arabic.
So in very simple terms, it's a war cry, and it relates back to the Battle of Khaybar, where hundreds and hundreds of Jews were slaughtered. Muhammad himself was involved. It's effectively a war cry. And interestingly, in Europe, if you go to a protest and you make that chant, you'll be thrown in the back of a paddy wagon straight away. So they know what it means. They know it's illegal. Now, I appreciate that police standing around the Opera House may not have been familiar with the flags that were there, which were for prohibited terrorist organisations, and there were flags waving. They may not be aware of the Arabic chants. I accept that. But when flares are lit off, when there's people getting scuffles in police and nothing happens, and then subsequently to that, over weeks and months, nothing happens, that really tells me that there's some willful blindness going on in the police, and they have an obligation not only to protecting their own officers from getting harassed by riot, but from protecting the community. And I think they failed in that responsibility.
But Yasmin Catley, the police minister here, has made it clear that they were basically concerned about keeping officers safe, not Jewish citizens and other citizens of Sydney.
Well, a few days ago on Australia Day, the police sent the actual riot squad to North Sydney to arrest a group of Nazis who were on a train headed into the city. Now, I'm no fan of Nazis, but they'd literally done nothing, and they sent the actual riot squad there. Whereas when you have an actual riot happening at the Sydney Opera House, you have police saying, well, we don't want to make trouble. I'm sorry, these are people for whom the police should be making trouble, and instead they just beat a tactical withdrawal, did nothing about it, and they've handed a message to these people saying, you own the streets, you can say what you want, you can do what you want, and the victims of that are going to be the Jews first and every other Australian second.
But this isn't isolated, this two-tier policing we have seen, throughout COVID. We saw it with the Black Lives Matter protests. And we've seen these protests grow. They're around the country. Of course, not everyone turning up to a pro-Palestinian protest is anti-Semitic or celebrating terrorism. But what's your message to those who do go along, who say, we just want peace, we want a ceasefire, we're not pro-Hamas? If you're marching alongside people who are pro-Hamas, where does that leave you? Well,
I think certainly everyone in the Jewish community wants peace, but what you saw there was not about peace, and it wasn't about a Palestinian state. It was about no Jewish state. It was praising violence. It was literally praising Hamas. And a lot of this footage, which we obviously haven't shown all the, we're crowdfunding the full-length documentary, and viewers can go to where'sthejews.com and they can make a donation to support this, because we've got footage, it's film quality, and it's going to be making a lot of people nervous. The other thing...
Has New South Wales Police sought any of that footage?
So it's interesting you ask, because the New South Wales Police have been offered a lot of footage and they essentially weren't interested. This was when they were doing their investigation into Gas the Jews.
Yep.
And, they were either relying on footage that was already on Twitter or YouTube, or YouTube, which is very downsampled and compressed. It's not the raw footage. But the other thing, if you look at the clip, that I just shown, and you can see it again on where'sthejews.com, you'll see the number of mobile phones there that are streaming and videoing it. So there's plenty of cameras out there that showed exactly what was said, exactly what was done. And if the police didn't go and get that footage, it's because they didn't want to know. And that's a problem.
They didn't want to know. Well, we've screened it here. This story is a national, global shame on Australia. It's a stain on us, a shame on the New South Wales Police, shame on all our politicians who haven't spoken out against that appalling behaviour there. And as I said at the beginning, well done, Multicultural Australia. Unbelievable. I mean, that is what we are allowing to occur on the streets, a celebration of mass murder and death, and our police, our authorities do nothing.